Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase, the podcast that helps you succeed in your business life and career. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group, and with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How about you, Eric?
I'm doing fantastic. It's hard to believe we are heading into fourth quarter already. So it's time for all of our listeners to look back at those New Year's resolutions they made back in January and see how far they've gotten to completing them.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we have a topic that we're going to be talking about today, which might light a spark for today, but hopefully it will carry on into next year and years beyond.
Hopefully, yes, what we're talking about is taking ownership or taking responsibility for your actions, for your goals. The truth of the matter is, you know, Chip and I were saying just before we came on the air, this should be common sense. Unfortunately, it isn't. Right now, we live in a world that is pervaded by a victim mentality. Everything is somebody else's fault. It's your parents for the way they raised you, the economy because it isn't perfect, the government, whatever the excuse is. And that's the key word, excuse. Because whatever you want to accomplish, you have to take responsibility for it. And we're actually seeing the perfect example right now of not taking responsibility for your own actions. And this is, I've seen it on television over and over again. Kamala Harris has just released a book about her 100-day presidential campaign. I believe it's actually called 100 Days. And every interview she's given, every clip that is released from the book, she's blaming somebody else for her not winning. It was too short a time. It was Joe Biden's fault for not pulling out sooner. It was the Democrats' fault for doing this. It was such and such's fault for doing that. And all she's managing to do with this is actually aggravate the people that she's blaming for her loss. Now, the fact of the matter is, doesn't matter how long the campaign was. She was chosen by the Democratic Party to be their presidential candidate. This is an opportunity that almost nobody gets. She should have taken responsibility for the campaign, for getting it done. And when it didn't work out in her favor, you take responsibility for that too. I just saw a great quote, and I'm forgetting who said it, but if you're not going to take responsibility when things go wrong, you don't get to take responsibility when things go right.
Yeah, I'm basically, I mean, we talk about this all the time. I talk about it all the time too, as far as personal accountability goes. The bottom line is the answer is always in the mirror. And so the
Yep.
blame game and everything else, you're just blaming something that you could have been doing yourself, just as you say. I mean, we're all 100% responsible for our actions. Blaming somebody else is an action of ourselves. And that's just the way that it works. So, if you want to make life work for you, believe me, people aren't looking out to say, okay, how am I going to make Eric a better person today? And how am I going to help him out? Maybe I will. I mean, I'm here every week and I want to do that, but that's because that's just the way I am. And that's just because you're the way that you are. But if you expect other people to come and actually make you better just because you expect them to, or because they're your parents or your friends or your kids or this and that, whatever, life doesn't work that way. The bottom line is everybody's in their own world. I always use that personal courtroom scene where you are the judge, you are the juror, and the jury box is empty. And what you're doing is you're judging yourself guilty of every single action that's going on, and you're blaming other people, but nobody's there to listen because they're all in their own courtrooms too. It's so, so important to just understand what reality really is. It's a lot simpler, but it's a lot more painful to realize that the answer is in the mirror, plain and simple. And I'm just as guilty of having thoughts about this as everybody else. And I'm sure that we all have those, but keep those thoughts to yourself and try and approach it in some positive sense and figure out a way that you can do that. And once you do, it fosters growth and integrity and confidence in yourself, and it strengthens your relationships with other people. And basically, that's the most important thing. If you get known as somebody who owns your actions, you are somebody that other people can trust because they know that you're looking out for yourself first, but then you're looking out for them too, and you're genuine. Period.
That's so true. And I was told a story last week by Jim Britt. And for those of you listeners who aren't familiar with Jim, Jim is a world-renowned speaker. He's a motivational speaker. He was one of my collaborators on Cracking the Rich Code. In fact, it's his series of books that we worked on. And he told me this story last week in one of our groups that he was at a conference and this woman told him she could never succeed. She'll never be a success. And he says, why? She said, well, my father was always very abusive to me, not physically, but he told me I would never amount to anything. I couldn't do anything right. I was stupid. And he told me this over and over again. And Jim asked her, well, have you spoken to him about this? Have you confronted him? And she said, well, he passed away years ago. And Jim looked at her and said, so who's abusing you now? And she said, I don't understand the question. And he came back to her, I believe it was a total of 7 times, each time asking her, well, who is abusing you now? Who is telling you you're no good, you can't succeed? And after going over this with him 7 times, she finally realized what he was getting at. She said, oh my God, I'm the one abusing me now because I'm telling myself these things, but I'm blaming my father because he did it years ago.
Yeah, I mean, human beings are the only creatures that can wallow on the same thing over and over and over again. You look at your kids before when they're growing up, before they're getting baggage and so on and so forth. One minute they could be really upset, the next minute they're playing. But dogs, cats, everything else out there, basically it's just the present moment. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt that once said, if I could kick somebody in the rear end, most responsible for all my problems, I wouldn't walk for weeks. And
Right.
basically, it's because they're all in your head and you're doing that. We always talk about living in the present moment. When you are wallowing in the past and blaming others about the past, you are doing that in the present moment. When you are worrying about what's going to happen in the future, you are doing that in the present moment. And what's so, so important is that if you understand that, you're still going to do it. But if you put it in perspective, saying, hey, all right, I'm doing it again to myself, and try and replace that with something that is more enjoyable, like the present moment, like looking outside or enjoying your friends and family for what they are, just reaching out and doing something nice for somebody. Eventually, it's not so important anymore to keep kicking yourself in the butt.
Yes. And it's not just about what you do. It's also about what you say to people and how you act. You have to take responsibility for this. If you're working with somebody and they have a part of a task and they don't finish that task the way you expected or the way you intended, you can't blame them and say, oh, you didn't do what I wanted. You have to take responsibility for them not understanding how you wanted it done. You are always responsible for what your goals are, for what your tasks are, even if somebody else is doing part of it. And a great example, there's a fantastic book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And Jocko is a business consultant now. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he served in Iraq as a SEAL. And the book tells stories about what happened in Iraq and how those lessons translate into business. And one of the stories he tells is an operation that went wrong, injured one of his teammates that he was in command of. And they pulled back. His supervising officers were coming to evaluate everything, and he was responsible for figuring out what went wrong with this operation. And he figured it out. He knew what he was going to say. He had his entire SEAL team at the meeting. His supervising officers were there. And he said, okay, who is responsible for this? And one by one, several of his team said, I didn't do this. I should have done this. I am responsible. And he told them, no, you're not responsible. And after 5 or 6 people took responsibility for their actions in what went wrong, he said, there's only one person responsible, and that is me. I am the commanding officer. It was my job to coordinate everything. It was my job to make sure everything went without a hitch. Now, he had right there in that room 5 different people who had stepped forward and said, I screwed up. I did not do this. It's my fault. If he was looking for an out, he had it. But he wasn't looking for the out. He took responsibility because as a team leader, you are responsible for the team. And uh, another example, also from the military, but financial leader Ken Langone, who most people know because NYU Medical Center is named after him, but he's also the man responsible for the financing that built Home Depot, that built Kenner Toys. He's done so much. And he told the story of he was a squad leader in the military and hadn't been home for weeks. He was on duty. The squad got a weekend pass, and his supervising officer came to him and said, you're not going anywhere. He said, why? He goes, you see that man over there? Yeah. He showed up to inspection. His boots were not up to snuff. He did not pass inspection. You are the leader. You are responsible for the squad. So you are going to spend the weekend here shining all of the boots. And you can guarantee nobody in that squad ever did not pass inspection again. You have to take responsibility, not just for you, but for the people whose jobs are in your hands, your team members, family members, in many cases. You have responsibilities to all of these people, and it's not the way you grew up that you can blame. It's not, oh, I never got an opportunity. Opportunities are everywhere. And if you don't take those opportunities, that's on you. You didn't learn what you needed to learn in school. Well, how long have you been out of school? There's libraries, there's the internet, there's Audible, there's all these educational resources many of which are free. We've done entire podcasts about them. So, why did you not learn what you needed to know? You made the decision. Everything you do, you made the decision. Even if you didn't make a decision to do something, that in and of itself is a decision. So, when push comes to shove and something either happens or it doesn't happen, good or bad, you have to take responsibility. You have to take ownership.
Yeah, and obviously many of you out there aren't in positions of having people under you and so on and so forth. But it all starts with yourself. And so, I mean, it's so important to just build trust within yourself and just realize that whatever you do, you're 100% responsible for. And you just gave some great examples of people who did achieve responsibilities and so on and so forth, who kind of messed up because they didn't do that. But if you want to be known as somebody who's trustworthy, if you want to be authentic to yourself and the people out there, it all starts with that person in the mirror. And it's easier said than done, but it's simple too. I mean, the simple truth is you own it. You own everything that you do. And if you understand that, that is really the most important takeaway for today is that no matter what you do, you own it.
That's it. The simple fact is, even if you're not the team leader, remember the example I just gave of the Navy SEALs. You had 5 members of the SEALs who were not the team leader, ready to take responsibility for their actions. If you are part of a team, even if you're low man on the totem pole, taking ownership of tasks, first of all, it's the right thing to do. Second of all, it gets noticed. People know when you're the type of person who does what they say they're going to do and takes the blame if they don't, or if you're the type of person that will make all sorts of promises, never follow through, and blame circumstances. Now, guess which type of person is going to have more access to opportunities, more access to advancement, who's going to be more trusted? Obviously, it's going to be the person that takes ownership. People don't want to have to worry about what you're doing. If you're working with someone, if you're in a relationship with someone, they want to know when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. Not, I'm going to do it if everything goes right. Not, well, I would do it, only, I grew up disadvantaged. Not, well, I would love to do it, but the whole world is against me. You're not a victim. You have the ability to move forward. You just have to commit to doing it. Make the commitment to your goals. Make the commitment to your tasks. Make the commitment to the people in your life who are most important to you. And follow through. Take ownership. As I said, Jocko's book is actually called Extreme Ownership. And, he comes at this from the point of view of a Navy SEAL, where literally decisions are life and death. Now, fortunately, most of us are going to only very rarely have to deal with an actual life or death decision. But there's an old saying, how you do something is how you do everything. You should be taking that same ownership for the little tasks. as you would for something that your life depends on. Whether it's cleaning the kitchen after dinner, whether it's tucking your kids in at night, whether it's a project at work, or whether it's a favor that you promised someone you'd do. You said you were going to do it. It needs to be done. You have to take ownership. And that's what builds character. It also builds resilience. I'm not talking about just things that you're doing for other people or that other people notice. If you set a goal for yourself and nobody else knows and it's not going to affect anyone else, well, guess what? You still need to commit to that goal and take ownership of it and take responsibility over whether you achieve it or not, because it's all up to you. There's basically two types of people. There's folks that take responsibility and take ownership, and there's people that think they're a victim for everything that happens in the universe. It's against them. They never got the chance. It's They'll blame anybody but themselves. That's a lack of character. And character isn't just what you're doing for other people. It's a very old saying. Character is what you do when no one else is looking.
Yeah, and life is all about relationships. And, we were talking about victims and so on and so forth. Basically, if you're a victim, you're the persecutor too. And relationships is what life is all about. And the more positive relationships that you have with other people, the happier you are going to be, and the happier they're going to be also, and the more effective you're going to be. I mean, when that happens, personal responsibility kind of comes automatically because it is part of you. But what relationships do, if you take responsibility for yourself, it strengthens not only the bonds with yourself, but with your friends and your family and your coworkers. And it allows you to go out there and communicate a whole lot better about the consequences of what you've done, about how you can make things improve, and so on and so forth. But this really starts with the relationship again with the person in the mirror and realizing that if you are the victim, you're also the person that's causing the problem in the first place. I know that I'm repeating myself time and time again, but my purpose normally when I'm talking to people is not for them to walk out with a whole long checklist of things that they have to worry about, because that's victimhood also. If you could just come away with a few points that number one, I'm in charge of the person in the mirror. Number two, I am beloved from creation on, and I have the ability to go out there and be kind to myself and just spread that kindness to everybody else in everything that I do, which includes all of your actions and being responsible for whatever you're responsible for. That's the main thing. And obviously, all these side benefits of achieving goals and growth and development and so on and so forth, they're going to happen automatically once you just grab control of that person in the mirror and say, that's it. I'm responsible. The buck stops here.
Exactly. And what we're talking about is not difficult. You can take responsibility for your actions at any time, but you can also take responsibility for what situations are around you that you're involved in with one simple question. Ask yourself, how can I make this better? That's it. That's all you have to do is ask yourself, what can I do to make this situation better? If you choose not to do it, you're not taking responsibility. It's as simple as that. So we are just about at the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for this episode?
I'm going to put it back into a very simple thing that I talk about all the time. I mean, I just talked about it's the person in the mirror, the buck stops here. I also talk about life's formulas, present moment events, event plus response equals outcome. between your response, which is the action, and the event is your reaction. And this is where all the problems, blaming and so on and so forth go. So basically, during that pause, the takeaway I just learned from you, the pause, how can I make this better? Put that between your reaction and your response and watch the magic happen.
Exactly. I think that's, I completely agree with you that that really is the big takeaway. We've talked on many podcasts about event plus response equals outcome. And, credit to Jack Canfield, that's where it comes from. It's his baby. But it's so true. And we've talked about taking that pause. And that pause is where you take responsibility. That's when you acknowledge that you have the power to change things. You're not a victim. You control your destiny. You have free will. And we make decisions every day. And even again, not making a decision is a form of a decision. Procrastination is a decision. Make the decision to take responsibility, to take ownership, to make things better. You will be amazed at how much further you can go in life, how many more opportunities you'll see, and the much better results that you'll get simply by saying, I am responsible for this. I am going to commit to doing this, and I am going to make it better. And just imagine if everybody did this. Nobody claimed to be a victim. Nobody claimed everybody was oppressing them. Everybody took responsibility for their actions. There would be so much more going on in the world so that would be positive. And isn't that the point of all of this? To make things positive. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode of the podcast, as well as the rest of the Xvadio Podcast Network at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.